For me, as chair of the British Science Association, I'm delighted that you've given your time to come here. At the BSA, what we stand for is bringing science into the mainstream of the public debate. And we hit on this subject of trust because it's an absolutely classic example of challenges that we all face, but increasingly facing scientists. Of course, I'm speaking to you as a former politician. And let me just give you some statistics about trust. 21% of people trust politicians. 79% of people trust scientists. We politicians are just slightly behind estate agents on 25%, and scientists are just slightly behind the people most trusted, doctors, on 89%. So it may seem rather presumptuous, me as a former politician, talking to a group of people, so many of whom are scientists and people interested in science, about trust. But I'm doing this in the spirit of a convicted criminal, an old lag, sent to a group of impressionable youngsters to warn them about what will happen if they don't learn from the terrible mistakes that we've made. And there are actually some lessons from politics, which I think applies to this challenge of trust in science. For a start, I do detect signs that the assumption that scientific expertise automatically gains you authority is under threat. I think of going to a science festival where youngsters were being shown a set of, I think they were tomato plants or pea plants or something, and they were told to try to work out which one had been grown using genetic modification. And some of them were manky, misshapen, peculiar tomato plants, and others were sort of flourishing, burgeoning, in-your-face, perfectly formed tomato plants. And 90% of the kids chose the most manky and misshapen tomato plant as the one that was GM. The answer, of course, was actually it was the flourishing plant which was GM, but that was the opposite of what they thought. And it showed that there's a challenge in science communication and trust in scientific expertise as well as one in politics. And you can see some other examples of this challenge. Are scientists who are employed by commercial organizations doing R&D for a business, are their views to be given the same weight as other scientists? You notice increasingly in the media the assumption that if you're employed by a drug company or an agricultural company, that means that your views as a scientist are less reliable. So does the scientific discipline not apply equally to people who have a commercial employment? What about the challenge of the non-reproducibility of results? Does that in turn tell us that there are now very strong incentives for scientists to report positive results and much reduced incentives to report negative results? Perhaps even as Science Minister, I was responsible for maintaining or increasing incentives to get out those positive results and not to draw attention to the negative results. And again, for me as a former politician, a striking contrast where in politics, every day the papers look like a journal of negative results. And the one thing you don't get is coverage of the positive results. Completely the opposite of the logic of how you get an article in Nature or Science, where it's the positive results that get the attention and nobody's interested in the negative results. But neither set of incentives is necessarily the right ones for assessing these activities. And then the challenge of whether people should just trust experts as experts, and what kind of narrative there is, why experts should be trusted, especially when there are lurid conspiracy theories which also infect the scientific debate just as they infect the political debate. I remember one professor telling me he'd been struck by the increasing number of students arriving at his university, 18 or 19, who thought that the moon landings had been faked, because there were so many conspiracy theories on the web. They couldn't get there. They thought it was pretty obviously filmed in the Mojave Desert. Nobody had actually gone to the moon. So people going to do science at universities are susceptible to these conspiracy theories, just like everyone else. So I think There are powerful reasons why we at the BSA have chosen this challenge of trust for our first Huxley Summit. I hope in the course of the day, with so much interest, experience, expertise gathered here, that we will identify what the problems are and perhaps even better, identify some productive ways forward. And let me end with some other advice from us in politics. Firstly, transparency may be desirable. Transparency is undoubtedly a precondition of being able to participate in public debate in the 21st century. It does not of itself solve the problem. There is no evidence from what we've done in politics in the last 10 years that being more transparent has increased trust in us. What does increase trust is frequent interaction and engagement. Constituency MPs are more trusted than politicians in general. Anything that brings people into contact with scientists and gives them the opportunity of exchanging and learning from them and putting to them their concerns and then interacting again and again. Anything that generates repeat interactions is a fantastic way of creating trust.